So tell me a little bit of what's going on.
Um, just life, trying to figure it out.
Oh, I'll help you as best I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just to be clear, I have your chart on my left. I have your sun's chart as well, and I have the correspondence to my right. So if you see me looking away, it's simply to pull in resources. And then otherwise, the way these sessions generally unfold is you bring to me what's on your mind, questions, thoughts, certainly emotions or energy that's been weighing on you. And then I will pull a combination of both intuition as well as kind of spiritual intention into the dialogue to try to reframe it and otherwise guide you down what feels like a healthier path.
Okay.
Okay, because you're on a very long spiritual journey. You just happen to come into this physical body, generally for some purpose. It's lessons or growth of some sort, and it's usually oriented around moving forward your consciousness, which is the love and the light that is you, gets stronger and stronger with each incarnation to the point where your human self and your spiritual self are in perfect alignment. And when you're not in alignment, the further you are from the intention, that's the more suffering is a common word, or turbulence or disruptions or uneasiness that you feel. So when people are way out of alignment with what they're intended for, they're really suffering quite badly. And what the suffering does is it's a mechanism by which it tells you that you're not necessarily going down the path intended, or that the lessons that are being learned have to are best served calling you into a spiritual mind and breaking from the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
suffering really exists within the human space.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I've been kind of forced into that with Nate leaving like he did.
Yeah, and so it's always a tricky piece of the puzzle. We'll explore it more. There are occasions where a suicide is oriented around kind of a deliberate act by a child to help a parent grow. In my experience, is just my personal experience, suicides are generally frowned upon by the spirit realm because an incarnation is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, it's the intention of staying here as long as you can to continue to learn what it is that you came to learn. It's quite possible that Nate was suffering or struggling in his own right, and a convalescence of details had him decide that it was time to leave. And it's quite possible that obviously that brought a lot of pain and suffering into your space, as it did for others that were very connected to him and very loving with him, loving embrace.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, we can only ever know so much. So we have to use the energy and the emotions and the logical mind as best we can to bring it all together to try to understand a little bit better of what really happened.
Right.
And that's what we try to do. And so the chart gives me an indication of what was going on in his life and the energy dominating his space. And then you can share some details, and we'll see
Mm-hmm.
where it leads us.
Mm-hmm.
And I have his chart on my right, and I have your chart now on my left. So,
Okay.
all right. So maybe we can start, Lisa, if you'd like, just tell me a little bit of what primarily motivated you to contact me, and we'll just kind of take it from there.
I saw you on channeling Eric, and I felt the connection, and then I just, Nate's been teaching me the last 2 years, and really broke, like, I felt like when he left, it just shattered, like an egg, and then your shell's gone, no protection, and but he didn't leave though immediately. He was communicating like immediately, and I'm like, how can this be? So I've learned everything the hard way, like I have most of my life. Just, this is, Nate's still here.
He's very much still here.
Yeah, and he's very much. And the thing is, I think that's what maybe drew me, why he was drawing me to talk to you, just to learn and grow and open my mind, because Nate was always like, Mom, stop judging. I've been a judgmental person in my life, and I've had to change that drastically the last 2 years. And like, it's all been good. The only thing good is not having him here where I can see him.
Yeah,
That's the
truly.
hard part.
Yeah, and so that judgment that you speak of, it usually means that you're, in general, either judgmental of self or quite conscientious or fearful of others being judgmental of you.
Yeah, both.
So if they're, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, we have a singular lesson oriented around an incarnation. Like a life lived is actually about either integrating a new quality or breaking from an old one. So like, for example, somebody who suffers from jealousy could be putting themselves in situations for many, many lives to just see if they can stop exhibiting that single quality. And so if somebody has judgment, and judgment can emanate from a lot of different places, but if somebody has judgment, then they continue to struggle with this. Once again, it's a human mind manifestation, but it's, what are we really judging? What is the judgment doing for us? Are we otherwise benefiting from any form of judgment? And if the answer is no, sometimes there's good things to judge a situation, like to fairly assess it, can be very beneficial. To judge it with the consciousness that something's wrong, or that we know better, or that in some way or another we're not in acceptance of the reality, then the judgment becomes really an egotic or a human mind, or a liability, if you will. And so, and we'll figure it out in the context of Nate sharing that with you, and that being the first thing that you brought up, and then my whole body lighting up with tingles when you start talking about it. Because if that judgmental part is with you, it would potentially be pervasive in every facet of your life, your relationship space, self-image, the joy and happiness that you experience. Judgment can become a really toxic energy. It can be just a burdensome energy, where the mind is constantly attuned to flaws and details everywhere they look, and it starts, and it reinforces a mentality that constantly has them thinking that something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the most profound lesson there is when you see that all those flaws and mistakes are actually part of a whole, and it's only with those flaws and mistakes that everything is right. It's like these tiny little imperfections that your mind is picking up on are actually necessary for the construct to be whole and complete. We'll get into it more. We'll get into it more. So Lisa, just tell me then. So Nate ended up leaving, and then he was young. What was his life like leading into when he left?
He was 13. He's just a great person. He had lots of friends, and they all adored him, and he was very protective of his friends. And
what was not right at the time?
We don't know. Elizabeth has shared some things with me that there were spirits in his negative, low spirits in his room the night he left. And also,
but we all deal with spirits. Half of us are under attack every day.
Right.
What was?
He had the flu the week before. I don't know how he got into. We don't really know. He had just a lot of things. We just call it the perfect storm, and just
I'm looking at his chart here. He did have a tough set of transits. Any, it's really young, but matters of sexuality, emotional matters, relationship-based, like heartfelt experiences, something that left him emotionally vulnerable. Anything like that going on in his life?
He had an argument with his best friend. Bob and my relationship bothered it, our struggles, of course, affected him.
Yeah. Was he otherwise, like, in general though, he was positive, he was expressive, he had artistic talents?
Yeah, all that.
Yeah, I mean, and he was lovable, like he wore his heart on his sleeve. You could feel his, you could feel his
Yeah,
nurture and his affection when you met him.
yeah,
He
yeah.
had
That's he.
a big heart. He's a,
Yeah, he definitely left an impact on
yeah,
our community, our whole community. We 4,000 people. We watched his service, and we're in a small community. But
wow. What are you still upstate New York?
yeah,
Can I ask how he left?
he hung himself.
Something else was going on. And so, and his academics were fine. His connection with schooling was okay.
Yeah, he didn't agree with some of the way the teachers treated the kids. He was upset with that. Some of his friends, so some of the things there. I think he was, what do you call it? Trying to defend. I think a friend or two, and
Yeah,
with the powers that be at school. But he didn't have problems. He was a good student. He was A and B student.
yeah, and he had a strong connection to the family, and he had an innate he had an ability to. I mean, he could speak up for himself too.
Oh, he did. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
and
got a
others.
very he's got some he's got some very strong placements in this chart.
Elizabeth said she was shown a like a race car, like that maybe he had a little more than he could handle was
There's
what he
no
came into.
I'm not getting, I don't know what Elizabeth was sensing. I'm sensing that something that's darker and heavier that perhaps isn't as well known that was burdening him for some time. There's no instance of rape or molestation or something really heavy like that.
No.
But the act of hanging, I mean, it's a premeditated act, right? That's like, let's get the rope, find the right place. It's designed, it's thought through a bit, right? Was it
His
haphazard
was
or?
um, almost more spontaneous. He used his little league belt and a rope hook in his room. So
Lisa, I'm so sorry.
yeah.
And so then he ends up leaving, and then you're feeling him pretty continuously, and then he's sending you indications that he's still with you.
Oh yeah. We have pictures. Yeah, he photobombed his best friend. I saw him. I've never been to this church before, but I went with my future daughter-in-law the Sunday after he left, and I saw him clear as day. I'm thinking, I'm telling him, Nate, they're going to take me to BSU. It's right next door. But I saw him clear as day. He was flying in the cathedral, and just, it was beautiful.
And he
Huge
was
smile. And
and he was at peace. And
yeah,
it's so hard to think that he would have just a few bad days and then just do something impulsive like that. It's certainly possible, but it's really hard to think.
he'd
He,
been thinking about it. We found music the XXX, the music he was listening to was very, basically suicide music, basically.
okay.
Yeah, very influential. And
So, I mean, a scorpion in general, this is the tricky part about the scorpion. Scorpions are I regard them as the heaviest energy of the zodiac. The scorpion is a well of deep emotion that has trouble accessing their feelings. So, he has his subconscious, which is, we have the conscious and subconscious mind. Nate's subconscious was sitting in Cancer, which is really quite beautiful because it brings a nurture and a compassion and understanding for the needs of others. But his conscious mind, which is the self and the identity, was sitting in Scorpio with a few tough aspects that didn't necessarily allow him to tap so effortlessly into his own feelings. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the sort of chart which brings him a degree of understanding of the emotional needs of others without really being able to express his own struggles or emotional needs.
Yeah, that's neat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it particularly hard for us because if he was suffering with something, for starters, he necessarily wouldn't have been aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he was adept at tapping into what it was that was ailing him, he had his communicative self was sitting right next to it, he necessarily wouldn't have been able to articulate it.
Mm-hmm.
So he
Yeah.
had both the challenge of figuring out what was burdening him and the challenge of then finding the courage, the words, the capacity to go and share it.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those would have been much easier for him to want to hug somebody or hold somebody or fight for somebody and stand up for somebody, or to even to be the music's an interesting one, but any form of expression, artistic and otherwise, would have been a lot easier for him than the actual words around how he was feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it kind of leaves us at a bit of a deficiency. For as it relates to you and your journey, the biggest part of it is how you feel after his departure. And so if he is bringing joy and peace and serenity to your space and he's comforting you and supporting you, it's the most beautiful indication that he's doing just fine, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that in many ways it is him walking with you as best as he can from an energetic realm to still continue to exhibit love towards you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in some ways he'll remain like ageless, if you will. Like you'll eventually, the incarnation will come to pass and you'll return, and that 13-year-old boy will be there receiving you.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you settle back into the spirit realm, the 13-year-old boy will dissolve away and the spiritual self will emerge, and your dynamic with him will allow you to see more clearly into this incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, it brings it back to your space to
Mm-hmm.
figure out,
Yeah.
how do we understand you? How do we understand the lessons here? And then, of course, where do we go next?
Right.
Right. And so your chart, which I have to my left, your relationship space is perpetually challenging. It destabilizes you, and it also makes you feel it's emotionally destabilizing. It leaves you quite vulnerable, and at times it can feel quite restrictive. It's a lot of energy in the relationship space, and then there's a particularly strong focus on the material realm, the physical realm. I don't know if there's a money consciousness and a fear around, well, just a particular attention to the practical, the material, the things around you, the home, the items, the second house. The second house, in a general sense, is going to be the responsible house of the physical world. And in your case, it's sitting in Virgo, so it's very attentive to the details that define your space.
Right.
And so that's just kind of the starting point to it. There's some family energy, but it's a little bit delusional. It prevents you sometimes from seeing it so clearly. And then there's a wound. There's a wound in the heartfelt space, which would be if there is a bad breakup, it will stay with you for a long time. And actually, it could be Nate's passing that is that wound, or it could be the breakup from like a marital loss, for example.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I lost my brother to suicide when I was 11. My parents divorced when I was 13. So there's a lot of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Nate, of course.
How old was your brother when he left?
He was 20.
Do we know why your brother left?
No.
Was he gone before Nate was born or after?
Yeah, way before. Yeah. Yeah, that was 1975 when he left.
And then Nate was born in 2004.
Yeah.
And no explanation around either of those suicides.
No. Mm-mm.
What was your brother's birthday?
His was November 8th. 19, not sure the year, no,
You have 6 days apart and
62.
birthday.
Yeah. My other son was born on his birthday.
Something else is going on here, Lisa. It's all the Scorpion energy coming into the space, and
Hmm.
multiple suicides, multiple young, unseen, unexpected suicides.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother was 10 days into his marriage. He just got married. And no explanation. He just got up and
And it was the only time he had ever attempted suicide before.
yeah.
And Nate hadn't attempted suicide before either.
Nate had said something to a friend a year before with um about he hadn't done anything, but he had said he was going to cut his wrist with a pencil sharpener.
Okay, but what
So
was
he had
the
been thinking about it.
okay, so what was the context of that comment?
I don't know. That was at school, and the counselor met with him, and she called me and said this happened, but he's fine. We talked to him, and
Because they couldn't get through him. They couldn't get into what was really on his mind.
yeah,
Had he ever hurt himself before?
no, at least not that we knew of. He was very he was a risk taker. He climbed to the top of trees, and he'd take the GoPro. He was all boy. He's very,
Yeah, truly.
yeah,
But he was also I mean, he had an attachment to his family here.
yeah, yeah. His brother, the one with this similar birthday, they were like best friends. He's devastated. He's still struggling, but
So, Lisa, when you go into a quiet space and you're able to connect with him, are you getting active messages, or are you just being comforted?
I was, yeah, no, I still get active messages when I take the time. I think I've been probably why you wanted me to talk to you. I've not been comfortable. I'm not talking to him anymore. I don't know if I'm angry or if I'm just, I still talk to him all the time, but I don't like, I've closed something down inside of me where I'm not, um, I don't know how to describe it. Like maybe I think I don't want to bother him, or I'm not worthy to talk. I don't know what it is. Something's weird with me though. But yeah, he's still,
You're, def-
to me,
you're,
he's communicated. Yeah.
you're definitely not bothering him.
Yeah.
Definitely not bothering him.
uh,
So why do you think he wanted us to speak?
uh, Part of my learning, I think, growth and
But what specifically do we want to grow through? Why do you think
understanding,
this
still
is?
trying to figure out my purpose. And because we have a family business, which is the material part, you're there. And
Yeah,
I
very strong material energy,
yeah,
but
my
very
dad.
strong money consciousness.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
Yep.
unassuming. We look at you, we don't think this is a woman that's hyper vigilant
Yeah.
about the finances, but that's what shows in the chart. So you're saying that your father put you in charge of
Our business.
the
Yeah.
manufactured home business.
Yeah.
Okay. And how old were
Yeah.
you when that happened?
uh Old, 45.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not old. Okay, so you're 45, you're in charge of the family business.
Hmm.
All right, so go ahead, tell me.
Yeah, that just wasn't anything I foresaw coming. I should have, but I just didn't see it. So he got Parkinson's and had to leave the business abruptly, and that's just what happened. So the last 10 years, that's been my consumed too much of my energy, and I feel guilty for that because I didn't give it to Nate, which I wish I would have.
So do you feel like you're spending more time at work at the detriment of your relationship with your son, or do you feel that you were spending more time at work, and if you had known that you were going to have limited time with your son, you would have spent it more with him?
The latter, yeah.
The
The
latter, right?
limited
So
time, yeah.
there's no guilt because
Yeah.
you feel like it impaired his development. You just felt like it would have been lovely if we had known that there was only so many
Yeah.
days.
Mhm.
But then more broadly, um, are you enjoying that work? Yeah,
For the most part,
yeah, it's okay. That work is okay for you, actually,
yeah.
and you're good at it.
Mhm.
And then you're able to support the family on it financially. You're healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is your father still with us?
No, no, he's been gone since 2012. Mhm.
And how about your mom?
My mom is still alive. She's 87. She's has a little dementia.
Yeah. And it's tricky. So what would you want to grow through at this point? Is your desire mostly to understand more about Nate? Is your desire like and where he is and perhaps the energy surrounding the loss a little bit further? Is your desire more of an introspective one to kind of understand how you have taken different steps along your path that's brought you here effectively, and then to try to figure out where you want to go from here? What
Yeah,
really motivates? It's the latter, right? You want to
the latter. Yeah, yeah.
more
I'm mostly
self-discovery.
at peace with Nate, other than missing him, but
Yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
learning to connect with him because he's shown me. He's just broken down all my limiting belief. Well, not all of them, but a lot of my limiting beliefs.
That's why he wants us to speak,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I can break down the rest of them.
Yeah, please do.
Well, you're in a bit of an illusion, if you will. Like this physical realm, which feels very real, because from the five senses and this vantage point, it is very real. But it's more of metaphorically, I would think of it more like a set, like almost like a stage, if you will, as if you're an actor that's part of a play that has been now produced on a big grand stage. And each day you show up and you say, okay, well, this is the costume that I'm wearing, and this is the role or the script that I'm abiding by. And all the people around you are doing the same thing, which is reinforcing this belief that we are, in fact, um, living this life each day, when in fact, you're actually just abiding by a script that you believe is the truth. And you're only wearing a costume that you feel is the role that you're supposed to to be wearing. And I say it metaphorically because when you become aware that you're just an actor on stage, you get to actually say, do I want to be on this stage? And if I was to walk off the stage, do I want to continue to be the part that I had been cast for? Right? And it's another way of saying it is you can be and do and believe anything that you want. It's just a matter of believing that you can be and do and believe anything you want. Right? The limitation is here. The limitation is what we believe to be true. The limitation doesn't exist beyond that. So I can give you a handful of examples. Like, so people like their money personality is a really good indication because people will spend all day. The Virgo mindset, with the amount of energy that you have moving through your second house, has you constantly conscientious about not just the counting and measuring of money, but the risk, um, the risk component of money, which is what happens if we don't have money? What happens if, the what ifs that run through the Virgo's mind all the time, all day, every day?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with planning for the future and saying, okay, this is what we spend, and then this is how old we are, and then this is what the business generates, and you can go and do your projections around it. The problems come in when the worrying or the fear and the anxiety are on constant kind of that constant drumbeat, which are not a value in any way to allowing you to live the most complete, happy, healthiest life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if, for example, you did all the math and you knew that the business is well established and that you're running it well and you've been doing it for a while now, and you know what the kids' expenses are, and of course there's always some degree of unpredictability, but in general, you have quite a bit of clarity kind of one year to the next. And yet the mind has you trapped in this belief that there's not enough, or that you could lose it all, or that you have to be hyper vigilant with how you spend it, and you have some deprivation going on because you want to be super cautious. then you're like,
Mhm.
well, there's a bit of a disassociation going on in my life now, because I know that my financial health is intact. And yet at the same time, I am spending a tremendous amount of energy, almost burdened by this belief that there's not enough,
Mhm.
or burdened by this belief that we could lose it.
Right.
And so when we come to terms with being an actor on a stage, what actually comes to us is that the cast, the role that you were cast for was the warrior who was financially sensitive, who was going to always be conscientious of money matters. And you get to show up and wake up each morning and say, do I still want to play that role?
Right.
And so up until now, Lisa has been playing that role brilliantly. Like, Lisa has done an unbelievable job of showing up exactly as the director, which in this case, you're the director of your life, but from a pre-incarnation standpoint, you directed yourself into that role and you've been showing up for it brilliantly. The idea of moving down a spiritual path is to start growing aware at all these pre-incarnation choices, because they were chosen to help you grow.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like, the relationship space is a beautiful one for you too. And actually, these are two of the big, there's something heavier about accessing your heart and your emotional well-being and coming to terms with opening up and living through a heartfelt space. That one's a bigger conversation down the line, when it might be a conversation that you're actually you're not telling me that you want to talk about it, but that might be a conversation that needs more attention.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, your son is hanging out with us all day. So that's another one. It's another one that needs more attention. But the low-hanging fruit, the easy part of this journey, which is where I would transition you first, is coming to terms with financial matters, which is really just how your mind operates in the anxiety of money, or the vigilance, the detail, the whether or not that's an actual benefit to you, or whether it's serving you. The second one is really dissecting the vulnerability and or the journey in the relationship space,
Mm-hmm.
because that's been particularly tumultuous for you, and with good reason. That was also part of your script, was to carry you into this difficult relationship space to try to figure out how you're going to navigate your way through it.
Yeah, it's been difficult. That's putting it mildly.
Yeah, well, you did you marry in your 20s?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, where in your 20s?
Well, we met when I was still 17, so we got
Yeah.
married when I was 22. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't stand a chance. And I say it not because at 22 you can't have a successful marriage, but because you have Saturn in your seventh house, which says if you marry in your 20s, you're toast. Wants you to actually get mature enough to actually know yourself well enough so that you can enter into stable relationships almost always after your Saturn return, which means in your 30s. So it would say that the marriage didn't, you led to divorce.
No, it's come up, yeah, many times,
But
but
you're still limping along.
yeah.
We didn't get permission from him to run his chart.
Not specifically, he said he didn't care. He knew I was still mine, but I didn't, yeah, I didn't get back to you on that.
Remind me of his birthday. Is it?
His is July 18th, 1963.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have any water in your chart. Was he not connected to Nate? He must have been. July 18th, 63. Is he healthy? Is he emotionally
Yeah.
healthy?
Emotionally healthy? No.
No. He's a wounded Cancer.
Yeah, he is very wounded. Mm-hmm.
A wounded Cancer, it lets you get away with too much, because a wounded Cancer is going to keep his emotions protected, or is just not going to be nurturing the way a Cancer is intended to. Your default is to move into a hyper practical space, achievement minded, hyper practical, with an emotionally unavailable or wounded husband and a hyper practical mindset. The both of you are just playing these parts that you you're playing the typecast. You're playing the roles, the generic roles that were intended for you for this life, which is what you're calling me for, is to help you identify the role that you're playing so that you can decide if you're ready to walk off the stage.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're playing your part perfectly. But that marital situation, it's remarkable because it brings, there's an emotional element to it which enters into the mix, but it's more of a vulnerability or an unpredictability or a volatility. It's like your volatile self, your least predictable self, shows up in the marital space.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, because your moon is sitting right there, and then at the same time, it doesn't feel like anything changes. It's like you're stuck.
Yeah, exactly. That's
So
it. Yeah.
so which is a remarkable contradiction to be like, wow, I'm so volatile, and yet everything's exactly the same. It's Saturn and the moon. You've got your moon, your subconscious, which is your feminine nurture, and it's sitting what's known as conjunction, so very close to the energy of Saturnian energy, which is integrity, discipline, consistency, lessons, time management. Those are both sitting right on top of each other, which are not the best energies for marriage, and they're sitting right there in Aquarius. It's funny.
Yeah, we kind of go alongside each other, live life alongside each other, and try not to upset each other.
Yeah, to maintain some cooperative.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but you bump into each other a lot.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, no, these are your moving parts. These are your moving parts. And then the big one, I don't know if it started with your brother. I don't know if has to do with the family dynamic. Your father, remind me your father's birthday?
September 8th.
Yeah, you got along fine with dad.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, because you had another Virgo on your hands.
Yep.
And your mom?
Hers is March 1st, 1933.
Yeah, that's water. They would have done better than you and your husband.
Really?
It wouldn't
They
always
did,
have, wouldn't have
yeah,
always, what's that?
they did divorce.
They
Yeah.
did divorce.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it wouldn't have always been easier, but a female water sign, it's a little bit of emotion when you're dealing with the Pisces, but a female water sign and a male earth sign, if healthy, it's always about being healthy, allows her to be the heart and him to be the head. When you have a female earth sign and a male water sign, it's the gender role reversal. As the female earth sign, you're the responsible one. You're the one that's reliable, financially dependent, consistent, achievement minded. Like you would be the energy that could hold together the practical qualities of the household.
Right.
And then by extension, you'd be relying on your husband actually to be the more nurturing, more affectionate. But if he's a wounded Cancer, the Cancerian energy, when it's wounded, it's metaphorically, it's the crab that gets scared and goes right into the sand. It kind of like hides, and it doesn't easily bring out its loving nature. So the Cancer is the most nurturing sign of the zodiac, but when wounded, it gets into a frightful state, and it doesn't. It gets really testy. Actually, it's kind of like testy is right the word. It's like it recoils quickly. It doesn't healthily engage the way you would want to really be, to go deep into what's going on.
Yeah. That's what's so hard, because sometimes he's the good side, not the wounded, and then he goes right into the wounded one, and so it's makes it really hard.
Yeah, because you don't know when it's going to come. You don't know what triggers it.
Yeah. Right.
And
Exactly.
he may not be fully aware of what triggers it either, because it's an emotion that he's not tapped into yet, which almost always means that there's the wound itself, the pain, the loss. Usually it's this feeling of either not being needed or feeling as if life is, sometimes it's an insecurity, the vulnerability that runs through the Cancer. It takes a long time to figure out what really is at hand there, because they have to tap into their feelings. But it's for the Cancer to actually go ahead and heal. And when they heal, then they can start to live through their heart more effortlessly. And then that allows them to stay present and work through problems. You know, whereas in your context, you actually don't have to heal in the traditional sense. You have to continue to engage the intellectual mind. And your intellectual mind, if it's really happy and healthy, we could intellectualize the process of moving into your heart. You can actually start to implement techniques that would allow you just to be more in your heartfelt space, but it would all orient around understanding. It's like, this part of you has to come online first for the rest of you to fall into order.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas your husband's the other way around. He has to tap into his feelings, his emotions, pain. He has to really go deep into that space, and he has to be able to bring that out. And once that's been healed, then the mind can come back online, which will allow him to have these kind of healthier conversations.
Right.
But that's kind of the work. When we're in a relationship space, we do work separately, and then we do work together, and then we do work separately. You know, like it's an unhealthy relationship is constantly projecting onto the other person what they have to change. Right? It's like, you have to do this. Well, you have to do this. And a healthy relationship is, like standing on both sides, your side of the street, if you will, be like, wow, this is my shit and this is his shit. But you have this intent on working on yourselves separately and then testing out how much progress you've made together.
Yeah. I think that's where we're at, actually. Yeah.
And so if that's the case, then you have an opportunity. You have clearance right now in your relationship space. You have clearance to do that work. You're going to wind up, next year is going to be a big testing ground for you, because you have your second Saturn return coming up, and it's running through your marital space, which means you're going to have one of those coming of Jesus moments where you're like, okay, is this really the energy that I want to kind of grow old with? And so that's a year and a half off. You're going to start to feel that kind of energy.
Okay.
Year and a half to, I could run the transits to give you the exact date, but when we go, there's 3 acts basically. We have our youth, which runs through our 20s, and then our first Saturn return happens. It says, okay, time to be an adult. You jump-started that by getting married early in your 20s. And so, but in general, it's like, okay, and then you kind of have the kids show up, responsibilities pile up, career takes off. And so then your second act is that hyper responsible parent, if you will, which carries you all the way through into your third act, which starts to mature and come into its own in your late 50s to set you up for, kind of the retirement, kind of the quieter years, the settling down into a reality that you've worked so hard to create. And so that becomes, that energy right now is getting close, where it's saying, okay, it's almost like a storm off at sea, if you will, where you're walking on the beach and it's a beautiful, bright, sunny day. And yet the waves are starting to pick up a bit. And you're like, I know something's not right when I can see the waves already getting higher. So those waves, those first waves, which is going to start to call into question how you're orienting yourself for the third act of your life, you're going to start to experience that towards the end of next year. And the primary focus of those waves is going to be in the marital space.
Okay.
Which is to say that the career will be the career, and it won't require you to do anything extraordinary with it. And the kids will be the kids, which is you'll continue to do the maternal responsibilities that you're doing. But the relationship itself, which is kind of limped along, is going to, if you're doing the good, healthy work now, then it's going to set you up to move through that transition healthily, and it will go and orient you or direct you down a good path in the next act. If you're not doing the work healthily, then when that storm gets closer and closer, it's going to be as if you're unprepared for it. Okay.
Right.
That's the nature of a Saturn return. But these, we've covered 2 of the 3, but these two items are the script that has been dictating your life. 2 of these 3, which is, and incidentally, the judgment, the qualities around judgment and stuff, I'm sure we can figure out how that plays into this. It's probably a byproduct of your attention to detail, to be frank, is my guess. But just because, yeah, because you're fearful of others being judgmental of you, you've probably been in a judgmental environment. You maybe experienced too much judgment, perhaps from your partner. I don't know where it all comes from. But the judgment is something that you can get beyond. You just start noticing when you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me just think a little bit. Give me a few more thoughts around your judgmental side. I'll see if I can pull it in.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the perfectionism that was expected growing up.
Yeah.
And
Which
but I put a lot of it on myself. My parent, yeah, my parents
you
expect a lot.
didn't mind it so much.
Not really, no.
No, you didn't
Mm-hmm.
mind it so much. You haven't shifted your mentality to see the imperfections in others as actually accentuating your best qualities. So here's a reframe for you. So there's actually nothing wrong with you enjoying your own perfectionist ways, as long as it's obviously within balance. You have to start appreciating the limitations that others carry. And so there's a South African phrase. It's Ubuntu, which is "I am because you are, and you are because I am." Which is saying, from a spiritual standpoint, is that I can only exist because of you, and you can only exist because of me. The qualities that we have, for better or for worse, are only good or bad, on a relative basis to the qualities that we can observe in others. And so if you happen to be particularly attentive to details and enjoy a perfectionist mindset, your attention to details is only extraordinary and only a real gift, because there are so many other people that lack attention to detail. It actually doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with their inability to attend to detail. What it does is it says that they're different from me, and because they're different, I can see how extraordinary my talents are.
Okay.
I'll give you a really simple example. Every so often, when you're checking out at like the grocery store, if there's a line, I don't know if you're in a small town, maybe there's not lines, but like
Yeah.
if you're in a line almost anywhere and there's somebody talking on their phone and they're just being really inconsiderate because everybody has to hear their conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So if everybody else in line is incredibly considerate and there's one person who's being inconsiderate, we can only see that they're behaving in an inconsiderate fashion, or that we are being considerate on a relative basis. So like before there were cell phones, everybody just stood quietly in line. You couldn't tell if somebody was considerate or somebody was inconsiderate.
Mm-hmm.
And then when cell phones got introduced and somebody started to behave in an inconsiderate fashion, it created a polarity or a relative framework by which we could start to see everybody else's behavior. And so every quality that you have that orients around judgment, which is something isn't right, something's not as good, something could be better, that mentality of judgment, if you start to orient it differently and you see, wow, their flaws, shortcomings, or issues, whatever it is that I'm observing, are actually just the other side of the spectrum. This is the polarity that exists within all of us, or within the universe, is all I'm observing here. So a magnet has a positive and a negative, right? We don't think that one is better than the other. They're just both sides of the magnet, right? The heat that the sun gives off is beautiful, but only because we can experience cold. If every day of our life was always just hot and there's no variance in the temperature, we wouldn't have an appreciation for the glorious warm weather. It would just always be the same. So we need the seasons to give us perspective on the joy of the warmth, right? If people were always in a state of perpetual love and understanding, then we would just think that love and understanding was just a quality that we don't even measure, because everybody has unlimited amounts of love and understanding. But because we know what hate and fear and contempt are like, we can create an amazing appreciation for love and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So when you find yourself observing a quality in another and judging that quality, all that you're really doing is saying, okay, that quality exists because it needs to exist for me to see that there's another way to be. And I have to appreciate that observation, to have an appreciation that there's another way to be.
Okay. Yeah.
It took
I
me a
like
few
that framework.
it took me a
Yeah.
few years to properly integrate this framework.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
everything that you're judging is only possible because there's a relative framework allowing you to judge it.
Yeah.
And if you grow appreciative of relativity, then you can start to overcome the judgmental mind.
Yep. I like that. Mm-hmm.
And that reframe could completely change your life. And I would
Right.
say this because judgment on its own is a negative or low vibrational energy.
Yeah. It's kind of
But
painful.
yeah, it weighs you down, it burdens you.
Yeah.
But having an acutely sensitive observational mind, which is what you have, and then using that beautiful observational mind to see the size of the spectrum and saying, wow, I'm observing the spectrum. And I love that everything exists on a spectrum. So I have a relative framework to view the world through. Now you're no longer being judgmental. You're just creating a spectrum everywhere you go. Right. And so when that guy is being inconsiderate, waiting in line at the supermarket, all he's really doing is creating that spectrum of consideration and inconsideration.
Mm-hmm.
And you can be in pure acceptance of him helping you see that spectrum.
Enjoy. Yeah. Enjoy his inconsiderate. Yeah.
And you
I
can
get it.
enjoy his
Yeah.
inconsideration.
Right.
You can enjoy the emotional unavailability of your husband even. You can enjoy all sorts of qualities that are being exhibited around you, recognizing that you get to choose what end of the spectrum do you want to exist on.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah, like I said, this basic concept could completely change your life. It just takes time. You have to reinforce it because
Mm-hmm.
the default is you as the actress on the stage. And what we're doing now is we're taking that script and we're throwing it out and be like, hey, we've rewritten the script. For now, you're still going to be the actress wearing that costume, showing up on stage, but we're giving you a different script. You have different lines. Your character is about to change its personality.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
need
what
that.
this reframe allows you to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's because that judgment, that quintessential quality of judgment, which is the first thing you brought up to start the conversation, that's with you, has been with you your whole life.
Yeah.
And if it's no longer serving you, but you can't stop being the observational self because it's so necessary for your success throughout your life, let's just take those observations and move them from a low vibrational to a high vibrational state.
Okay.
And that's going from seeing the world as being problematic to recognizing the beauty of these imperfections and elevating into a state of joy that we're able to observe them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it would change your life. It would change your life and you'd be more joyful. You'd be more joyful because you'd be more at peace with everything, and it would naturally shift your vibrational space, and it would start to bring people and events into your life that would reinforce that joy.
I will definitely work on that. That's no.
Yeah, there's a book. It's like razor thin. You sit on a Sunday afternoon for an hour and you read this little book. It's this old Hawaiian prayer. It's a nice way to start reconditioning the mind. It basically just says if you're critical of others, if your judgment moves to criticism and you can't quite break from it, or if you're burdened by some of the acts and the words of others, you can actually ask for forgiveness around it. You start to reframe the mind to start seeing that they're doing the best they can and you can forgive their acts, but you're actually forgiving on their behalf. So your observational mind is still observing it. You're just seeking forgiveness because we're all part of a collective. And once again, there's polarity, but we're unified. And so if you've said or done something that perhaps was cruel or inconsiderate, you can seek forgiveness. But if you've observed it in others, you end up seeking forgiveness almost as if it emanated from you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little prayer
Okay.
book. There's
Yeah.
a lot of spiritual nuggets in it. It's the Ho'oponopono prayer book. It's this whole,
Okay.
you buy it on
Yeah.
Amazon for like $5 or something.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely get it.
Get it secondhand if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you'll see. And then as far as the polarities, Alan Watts was a Capricorn, is a spiritualist, a British spiritualist who made his way to the States to lecture, and they recorded a lot of his lectures. So if you go on YouTube and you just Google
Oh,
Alan Watts,
okay.
search for Alan Watts. I don't know if he I don't know if he calls it polarities, but I listened to his lectures for it took me a few years before one day I just got it. And when I got it, because I had that judgmental thing going on as well. Once I got it, it was this most liberating moment.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
so
I'll definitely do that.
yeah, look him up. He's got good personality. He brings it together nicely.
Okay.
And then, you just keep stepping in this direction. These are slow little readjustments that would eventually have you facing in a completely different direction. You look around, you're like, wow, like, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 My direction is, yeah, that'd be good because I'm going that way. I just need to keep moving.
Just have to, they're little incremental. It's not a big bang, like you just wake up and you're a different person one day. There are moments in your life that will shock you, like the loss of a loved one. But in general, life is a series of small little incremental changes that over time, just because there's been a million decisions that have led you here, there's a series of incremental changes that we need to redirect you elsewhere. And you can do that. And then as the months wear by, especially if you journal or take account of it, you can start to see all the progress, and it becomes a motivator because you can see how much your efforts have redirected you into a healthier, more loving, more beautiful space.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes the spiritual journey. And if you're really lucky, then you have a spiritual awakening, and then the answers just stream in. You don't have to seek them actively the same way. They just come to you.
Yeah, that'll be nice. I've had a little bit of that. Nate's shown me a lot. He's shown me a lot.
I was saying you've got a companion.
Yeah.
You've got a companion, and if you understood really the journey that your souls have been on, you would understand with greater appreciation of exactly where you are and how it's where you're supposed to be.
Uh-huh.
It takes some time to get there, but yeah, you've got a beautiful companion, so let him be your guide.
Okay.
Let him be your guide. He's been listening to our whole conversation. He's been participating in this conversation.
Is he? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a voice.
He's got his ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. He's very active. And he's doing great.
Good.
All right, my dear. Yeah.
Thank you, Allan. Yeah. Yeah, I can't even see the time. Yep. Okay. Yeah. I'll have to talk again.
Yeah.
This was very good, very enlightening. I'll work on this, and I see why he wanted me to talk to you. I knew because he's very clear. I just know. I'm like, yeah, okay, I got to do that. I'll get around to it, Nate. I'll get around to it. So,
yeah. This is effortless for you, because you have the right mind to actually implement these changes and to enjoy the progress. You can enjoy this work. So, of course, he wants you to do it.
Yeah.
Like what else is there if not to bring you to a happier place? That's what he's seeking for you.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It was really nice talking to you. And so that would be my recommendation. The Ho'oponopono prayer book is just a cute little one that starts to get your mind thinking about the universality or the collectiveness. And then from there, we can always step into, and then the Allan Watts lectures are just, some of them are brilliant. And then you just let that become part of your mindset for a little bit. And then you reach out to me and we can figure out where to go next.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Allan.
Much love. Have a great day, my dear.